Mama Ngozi! Oh, Mama, thank God I have found you at last. You cannot imagine what I have endured. Obiora and I were kidnapped that night 25 years ago by slave traders, and we got separated. My son! Please, Mama Ngozi, take me to my son. I have dreamed of him every night of my captivity.
Mama, who is this?
Chisom, my son, my baby, I am your mother.
Stand up. Do not touch me. I know the truth. The neighbors remember. You were not kidnapped. You left me here like unwanted baggage because you were chasing wealth. You abandoned a 2-week-old baby to pursue your own selfish dreams.
They abandoned their baby at 2 weeks old to chase wealth. 25 years later, the mother returned to claim him when he became richer than kings. In the bustling town of Akadabu, where the marketplace hummed with life and the sound of talking drums echoed through the valleys, there lived a young couple named Adana and Obiora. They were blessed with a beautiful baby boy they named Chisholm, which means, God follows me. But their hearts were not content with the simple life they had built together. Adana would stand by the roadside, watching wealthy women pass by in their fine clothes and gleaming jewelry, their servants trailing behind them with parasols to shield them from the sun. Her heart grew bitter each time she looked down at her own faded wrapper and calloused hands. Obiora, too, would see successful merchants counting their cowries and dream of a life far grander than the one he had. When Chisholm was only 2 weeks old, still nursing at his mother's breast, Adana and Obiora made a terrible decision. Under the cover of darkness, they wrapped their son in a thin cloth and carried him to the home of Mama Ngozi, their neighbor who lived 3 compounds away. Mama Ngozi was a widow whose own children had grown and moved to distant villages. She had a kind face, weathered by years of both joy and sorrow, and she had often helped Adana with advice about caring for the baby. That night, they knocked on her door with urgent whispers. Mama Ngozi, Adana said, her voice trembling but her eyes hard with determination. We must travel suddenly to attend to a dying relative. Please watch over Chisholm for just a few days until we return. Mama Ngozi, her heart full of compassion, took the tiny bundle into her arms. Go, my children, she said softly. The little one will be safe with me. May your journey be swift and your relative be healed. But Adana and Obiora never intended to return. That very night, they split their meager savings and went their separate ways. Adana had heard of a wealthy palm oil merchant in a neighboring town who had recently lost his wife. She planned to present herself as a woman of virtue and good breeding, hoping to capture his heart and his fortune. Obiora, meanwhile, had learned of a rich widow in the eastern villages who was seeking a strong husband to manage her late husband's lands. Mama Ngozi waited 1 day, then 2, then a week. When a full month had passed with no word from Chisholm's parents, she went to their compound only to find it empty and abandoned. The neighbors shook their heads sadly, having seen Adana and Obiora leave in the night with bundles on their backs. Standing in that empty courtyard, Mama Ngozi looked down at baby Chisholm sleeping peacefully in her arms. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks, but her resolve was firm. You are not abandoned, my child, she whispered. God has brought you to me, and I will raise you as my own. Meanwhile, Adana arrived in the town of Umuse, where she presented herself to the palm oil merchant, Motsi Okoroafer. She wore her best wrapper and spoke in honeyed tones, claiming to be the daughter of a respected family who had fallen on hard times. Motsi Okoroafer, lonely and aging, was charmed by her youth and apparent gentleness. Within 3 months, they were married in a ceremony that the whole town attended. But Adana's joy was short-lived. On the night after their wedding, as she explored her new home expecting to find rooms filled with treasures, she discovered the truth. Motsi Okoroafer's wealth was nothing but appearance and debt. His fine clothes were borrowed. His compound was mortgaged to various creditors, and his palm oil business had failed years ago. He had been living on the charity and patience of others, always promising that prosperity was just around the corner. What have I done? Adana whispered to herself in the darkness, thinking not of the son she had abandoned but of the comfortable life she had left behind. She was now trapped, bound by marriage to a man whose debts became her own. Far to the east, Obiora faced a similar fate. The widow he had pursued, Madame Ifioma, did indeed own vast lands that were barren and rocky, yielding nothing but thorns and disappointment. Her wealth had been her late husband's, and she had squandered it on false prophets and crooked advisers who promised to double her fortune. Now she had nothing but empty titles and memories of better days. Obiora found himself working from dawn to dusk, trying to coax crops from unwilling soil, trapped in a marriage built on lies and greed. Both Adana and Obiora were too ashamed to return home, too proud to admit their terrible mistake. In Akadabu, Mama Ngozi raised Chisholm with all the love her aged heart could hold. Though she was poor, surviving on the kindness of her children who sent her small sums from their distant homes, she ensured that Chisholm never went to bed hungry. She would wake before dawn to process cassava for sale, her fingers working steadily while Chisholm slept. She taught him his first words, celebrated his first steps, and dried his tears when he fell. As Chisholm grew, neighbors would whisper among themselves about the abandoned child. Some pitied him, others judged his absent parents, but Mama Ngozi held her head high. "This boy is blessed," she would say. "Mark my words, God has great plans for him." Chisholm was indeed a remarkable child. By the age of 7, he was helping Mama Ngozi with her work, his small hands quick and capable. But what set him apart was his mind, sharp as a new blade, always asking questions, always seeking to understand how things worked. One day, a traveling teacher came to Akadabu, offering to educate children whose families could afford the fees. Mama Ngozi had no such money, but she went to the teacher, an elder named Motsi Chikudi, and pleaded with him. "This boy has a gift," she said, holding Chisholm's hand. "I have nothing to offer you but my prayers and my gratitude, but I beg you to teach him. I will work extra hours. I will go without meals. Just give him this chance." Motsi Chikudi looked at the earnest young boy and the devoted old woman, and his heart was moved. "Let me test the child," he said. He asked Chisholm several questions about numbers and nature, and the boy's answers showed not just knowledge but wisdom beyond his years. "I will teach him," Motsi Chikudi declared. "And I will charge you nothing, Mama Ngozi, because I see in this boy the future of our people." Years passed like water flowing down the great river. Chisholm absorbed knowledge like the earth absorbs rain. He learned mathematics and science, history and philosophy. But Mama Ngozi also taught him the wisdom of their ancestors, the importance of honor, the value of hard work, and above all, the power of gratitude and compassion. When Chisholm was 16, a wealthy businessman visited Akadabu, seeking to invest in promising young people. Motsi Chikudi presented several of his students, but it was Chisholm who captured the businessman's attention. The boy presented an idea for processing and packaging local herbs for medicine, something that could create jobs for the village while preserving traditional knowledge. The businessman, impressed by both the idea and the young man's humility, provided initial funding. "Show me what you can do with this," he said, handing Chisholm a sum that seemed enormous to the boy but was modest to the investor. Chisholm did not squander this opportunity. He worked day and night, involving other young people from the village, consulting with traditional healers, and applying the business knowledge Motsi Chikudi had taught him. Mama Ngozi, now quite elderly, would sit in the evening and listen as Chisholm shared his plans with her, her eyes shining with pride. "Remember where you came from," she would tell him. "Remember who helped you along the way. Success is sweetest when it is shared." Within 3 years, Chisholm's small operation had grown into a thriving business. He employed over 100 people from Akadabu and surrounding villages. His herbal medicines gained recognition throughout the region for their quality and effectiveness. He built a modern facility but ensured that the traditional healers were honored and compensated for their knowledge. By the time Chisholm was 25, he had become the wealthiest young entrepreneur in 3 provinces. But wealth had not changed his character. He built a beautiful house for Mama Ngozi, ensured she had everything she needed, and never made a major decision without seeking her counsel. He established a free school in Akadabu in Motsi Chikudi's name, ensuring that other children would have the opportunities he had received. The story of the abandoned baby who became a business magnate spread throughout the land. Newspapers wrote about him, radio stations interviewed him, and television crews came to Akadabu to document his success. Chisholm always gave credit to Mom Ngozi, calling her his true mother, the woman who had loved him when he had nothing. Far away in Umuse, Adana sat in her cramped room in Motsi Okoroafer's compound, now even more deteriorated and crowded with creditors. She was preparing a meager evening meal when she heard her landlord's wife mention Akadabu. Her hands froze over the pot. "They say a young man from there has become richer than the kings of old," the woman was saying to another neighbor. "His name is Chisholm, and he was raised by a widow named Mom Ngozi." The wooden spoon fell from Adana's hands. Chisholm, her son. The baby she had abandoned was now wealthy beyond measure, and she was trapped in poverty, exactly what she had tried to escape. That night, Adana made another terrible decision. She would go to Akadabu, claim her son, and finally live the life of comfort she had always desired. She didn't tell Motsi Okoroafer where she was going. Before dawn, she wrapped her few belongings and began the long journey back to the town she had fled so many years ago. When Adana arrived in Akadabu, she was shocked by how much it had changed. Where there had been dirt paths, there were now paved roads. Where there had been simple mud houses, there were now prosperous-looking buildings. And in the center of it all stood a magnificent structure, Chisholm's business headquarters. But Adana didn't go there first. She went to Mom Ngozi's compound, the place where she had left her 2-week-old son 25 years earlier. The compound was now a beautiful, well-maintained home, nothing like the simple dwelling Mom Ngozi had lived in before. Adana's heart filled with a mixture of envy and shame as she approached the gate. Mom Ngozi was sitting under a tree in the courtyard, sorting vegetables, when Adana entered. The old woman looked up, and for a moment, recognition flickered in her eyes. Then her face became still as stone. "Adana," she said quietly. "Mom Ngozi." Adana fell to her knees dramatically, tears streaming down her face. Tears that came easily after years of genuine suffering, though not for the reasons she was about to claim. "Oh, Mama, thank God I have found you at last. You cannot imagine what I have endured." She launched into her prepared story. How she and Obiora had been kidnapped that night 25 years ago by slave traders, how they had been separated, how she had been held captive in a faraway land, how she had only recently escaped and made her way home. Her heart breaking all these years for the son she had been forced to leave behind. Mom Ngozi listened in silence, her weathered face unreadable. She had lived long enough to recognize the smell of lies, but there was a part of her, the part that had always hoped for the best in people, that wanted to believe this woman might be telling the truth. "My son," Adana sobbed. "Please, Mom Ngozi, take me to my son. I have dreamed of him every night of my captivity." Before Mom Ngozi could respond, a car pulled into the compound. Chisholm had come home for his daily visit with the woman he called mother. He stepped out tall and dignified in his simple but elegant clothing, and stopped when he saw the strange woman kneeling before Mom Ngozi. "Mama, who is this?" he asked, concern in his voice. Adana looked up and gasped. Though she had last seen him as a tiny infant, she knew this was her son. She could see traces of her own features in his face, mixed with characteristics of Obiora. She reached out to him with trembling hands. "Chisholm, my son, my baby, I am your mother." Chisholm froze. He looked at Mom Ngozi, who slowly shook her head, sadness in her eyes. "She claims she was kidnapped," Mom Ngozi said softly. "She says she has been held captive all these years and has only now escaped." Chisholm's jaw tightened. He had always known the story of how he came to live with Mom Ngozi. She had never lied to him, never tried to hide the truth that his birth parents had abandoned him. As he grew older and wiser, he had investigated on his own, talking to old neighbors who remembered that night, who had seen Adana and Obiora leave voluntarily with their belongings. "Stand up," he said to Adana, his voice cold and controlled. Adana rose, hope flooding her features. She moved toward him, arms outstretched, but he stepped back. "Do not touch me," he said. "I know the truth. The neighbors remember. You were not kidnapped. You left me here like unwanted baggage because you were chasing wealth. You abandoned a 2-week-old baby to pursue your own selfish dreams." "No," Adana cried. "Someone has lied to you. I am your mother. You cannot send away your own mother." "My mother," Chisholm said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion, "is sitting right there under that tree. My mother is the woman who sacrificed her comfort to feed me, who went without so I could have. My mother is the woman who believed in me when I was nothing but an abandoned child. You are merely the woman who gave birth to me, and even that gift you threw away." "Please," Adana begged, now crying genuine tears of desperation. "I have nothing. I've suffered so much. You are my son. You must help me." "I help many people," Chisholm said firmly. "I have established programs for the poor, for widows, for abandoned children. If you are truly in need, you may apply for assistance like anyone else. But you will not manipulate me with false claims of motherhood. Leave this compound now and do not return." Adana's grief turned to rage. "You ungrateful child. I carried you in my womb. You owe me everything." 2 security guards appeared at Chisholm's signal. "Escort this woman from the property," he ordered. "She is not welcome here." As the guards led her away, Adana screamed threats and curses, but Chisholm had already turned to Mama Ngozi, kneeling beside her and taking her hands in his. "Are you all right, Mama?" he asked gently. "I am fine, my son," she said, touching his face with her aged hand. "You did the right thing. Truth must always be honored." But Adana was not finished. Consumed by bitterness and rage at being rejected, she made her way to the local television station. She had noticed their building on her way through town, and she knew they had interviewed Chisholm before. Now she would tell her side of the story. The television producer, always hungry for dramatic content, was immediately interested in the tearful woman claiming to be the famous Chisholm's mother. They put her on the air that very evening, during the prime news hour. Adana sat before the cameras, her face a mask of suffering, and told an elaborate lie. She claimed that she had returned from years of captivity only to be cruelly rejected by her son. She said that Mama Ngozi had poisoned Chisholm's mind against her, that the old woman wanted to keep her wealthy adopted son to herself and was preventing a mother from reuniting with her child. "I just want to hold my son," she sobbed into the camera. "I just want him to know that his mother never stopped loving him, never stopped fighting to return to him. But that old woman has turned him against me. She has stolen my son completely." The broadcast caused an immediate sensation. People across the region watched with sympathy, their hearts moved by this mother's apparent plight. Some began to question Chisholm's character. How could such a successful man turn away his own mother? Had wealth and pride made him forget his duties? But in Akadabu, the old neighbors who had known Adana and Obiora were outraged. They had watched Mama Ngozi struggle to raise Chisholm, had seen her sacrifice, had witnessed her unconditional love. They knew the truth, and they would not let lies stand. Papa Okafor, the eldest man in the neighborhood, gathered the other elders and neighbors who remembered that night 25 years ago. They went together to the television station, demanding to be heard. "You have broadcast lies," Papa Okafor told the producer. "In the interest of truth and justice, you must let us tell what really happened." The producer, sensing an even bigger story, agreed immediately. The next evening they aired a special program, "The Truth About Chisholm, Neighbors Speak Out." One by one, the neighbors sat before the cameras and told their stories. Papa Okafor described how he had seen Adana and Obiora leave in the night with their belongings, how they had clearly planned their departure. Mama Adaku, who had lived next door to Adana, revealed how Adana had often complained about being poor and had spoken enviously of wealthy people. Brother Emeka, who had been a young man at the time, told how Obiora had asked him for directions to the eastern villages just days before he disappeared, saying he had heard of opportunities there. Then they brought witnesses from Umuse. People who knew that Adana had married Matsi Okoroafor willingly, that she had pursued him deliberately, that there had been no kidnapping. They produced a marriage certificate showing the date, just 3 months after she had abandoned Chisholm. Finally, Mama Ngozi herself appeared on the program, her dignity unshakable despite her years. She held nothing back, telling the simple truth of how Chisholm had been left with her, how she had waited for his parents to return, how she had raised him with love when no one else would. "I do not claim to be perfect," she said to the cameras, her voice strong and clear. "But I loved that child from the moment they placed him in my arms. I never asked for reward or recognition. He is my son because love made him so, not because blood dictated it." Adana had her chance to be a mother, and she chose to walk away. She cannot return now and claim what she willingly abandoned. The broadcast changed everything. Public opinion swung dramatically. People were outraged at Adana's deception, moved by Mama Ngozi's devotion, and impressed by Chisholm's integrity in standing up for truth even when it would have been easier to appease a biological parent. The police, prompted by the public outcry and the evidence of Adana's false statements, arrested her for fraud and defamation. She was tried and sentenced to prison. Not a harsh sentence, but enough to make clear that lies and manipulation would not be tolerated. In her cell, Adana finally had time to think about all the choices she had made. She thought about the baby she had held for only 2 weeks, the child she had thrown away in her pursuit of wealth. She thought about how that child had become everything she had hoped to find: success, prosperity, honor, without her. The irony was bitter as medicine. Meanwhile, the broadcast about Obiora's involvement in abandoning Chisholm had reached the eastern villages. Obiora, still trapped in his failed marriage to Madam Ifeoma, watched the television in horror as his face appeared on the screen. His name spoken as a man who had abandoned his infant son. But Obiora, unlike Adana, was overcome with genuine shame. He had lived with regret for years, too cowardly to face what he had done, but now the truth was public. He could not show his face in the village. In the dark of night, he fled, running away once again, this time from the consequences of his actions. To this day no one knows where he went. Some say he is living in a distant city under a false name. Others say he wanders from place to place, unable to settle anywhere. His fate remains a mystery, a cautionary tale about the price of abandoning one's responsibilities. In Akadabu, life returned to a peaceful rhythm. Chisholm continued to grow his business, always ensuring that his success benefited the community that had raised him. He built houses for the elderly, including all the neighbors who had testified on his behalf. He established scholarships for children from poor families, remembering how Mama Ngozi had begged for his education. He created jobs and opportunities, transforming Akadabu into a prosperous town. Mama Ngozi lived to see her 95th birthday, celebrated with a grand festival that the entire region attended. Chisholm stood before the gathered crowd and told the story of how this woman had saved his life and shaped his character.